And the Rebbe continues now that the Rebbe that we just said, that the Laila Hu means the Laila is greater, it's a bigger darkness. You can't even feel that it's darkness. The Rebbe says in the Maimorim above, it's explained differently. Over there, actually, Laila Hahu is a higher level, is not as dark, is not as low as Laila Hazeh. Ulahoyir, the Rebbe said, Badrushim Anal Mevura Inyan, the Laila Hazeh, Laila Hahu, Boivan Achar. He explains there the meaning of Laila Hazeh and Laila Hu's in a different way. According to the explanation over there, Laila represents Amunah, when there is no understanding and there is no light. And Hazeh means that the Amunah comes down in an open way. And Laila Hahu would mean that even the Amunah is not so strong. So it turns out that in Laila, the Hazeh is greater than the Hu also. So Badiri explains the Laila Hazeh, Laila Bevanachad, the Inyan Yoim, the idea of days, Hu Sheyeshno Ri'iyo Belakus, that you can see godliness. Oy al kol ponim hasoga belakus. If you don't actually see it convincing, but there is a grasping godliness. That is when it's called that it's day by you. But mashenking sheyesh norak amuno. But if there is only amuno, you don't see godliness. You don't understand godliness. You just believe it. That's called nikra b'shem lailo. That's called darkness. What is the meaning v'inyan lailo hazeh, this night? That means that the Amunah is with full force and it's totally become truthful. Ultimately, you really become, the Amunah becomes realistic and truthful to you. Bedugmas ha'is asmus deriya. Similar ha'is amsus deriya, just like the truthfulness when you see something, you know it's true. Hazeh by Laila means that the Amunah becomes b'derech ha'is amsus. Bezohu shekosuf leil shimurim goimer, who, this is a day of guardians. Halaylo hazeh, this night is the Laila, the Amunah became Hazeh. The Agilu Shahoya Oz, Zeh, that Zeh that was then in the time of Yitzis Mitzrayim, Lahoya be'oifun sheniz battle choshech halayla. It remained Laila. It wasn't in a way that the darkness of the light was, the darkness of the night was negated, because they were still in Golus. Shadadayin hoya beGolus. In that night, it was still Golus. But it was a Laila Hazeh, that their Amunah was with a certainty, with a complete certainty. Just like the certainty when you see something. By the way, the Rebbe explains it, but the Rebbe will explain, and what would mean then if it was Halayla Hahu, which means that the Amunah did not really become realistic, his Amsu. So it turns out that Hahu would be a lesser level than the level of Hazeh. The Hazeh in the Laila, as we'll see, the Rebbe explains. So now the Rebbe goes in a bracket over here explaining why, how did they reach this level? How did they reach the level of Laila Hazeh, the Zeh, that it comes bevados? That came about through their work in Mitzrayim with the mortar and the bricks. In a similar way, also our emuna comes with those so that we should have emuna bevados shegam bizman hagolus yeh b'chinazeh, so that also in the time of golus should be zeh. That is through the effort and the work in Eisek HaTorah, because it takes substitute for the Chomer Levenim that the Yidden worked in Mitzrayim. Now in Golus, when we put in effort and hard work in our occupation of Torah, we reach the level that our Emunah, the Laila, should be Zeh, which is B'chomer. Carb responds do kal v'chomer. That is the idea of a foratory. When we learn, that's the mortar. Levenim is the bricks, is the whitening of the halacha. This is in learning of the Torah, the equivalent to b'chomer or bilvenim, literally. Balderech also similar to this is al yidei ha'omol v'yigia b'tirdes haparnosa, through the effort and the hard work in the troubles and the preoccupations of parnasa, with the sweat of your face you eat the bread, you reach to the level of hazeh. Just like Laila Hazeh, the life becomes of Yitzis Mitzrayim. They reached to that level through their work with the mortars and the bricks. So there was bricks and mortar, literally. The Rebbe is saying we're talking about irregular work, even the fact that you have to almost give a titus of parnasa. It's no different than also they reached it because they literally worked very hard. They reached to the level Laila Hazeh. That's where we reached to the level Laila Hazeh, that the Munah should be Bivados. V'zeu sha'amru, and this is why our sages tell us, Kol ha'mekabel olav oil Torah. So it says, if you want to accept, if you accept upon yourself the yoke of Torah, then they remove from you the yoke of the ways of the world, so you don't have to put an effort in the parnosa and tiris parnosa. You put it in the Torah. But if not, but if you remove the oil Torah, then you'll have to work hard. So why is that? Because you need something to reach to the higher level. You need to be tirdus and something, so you can substitute the tirdus of parnosa for oil Torah. But if you take away the oil Torah, you remove from yourself the yoke of Torah, you'll get the oil derech eretz, because ki gam al yidei oil derech eretz magim lebchinas laila zeh. For also through the yoke of derech eretz, you also reach the level of laila zeh. Ba'al pi pirush zeh shebadrushim b'laila hazeh. So what does it mean, according to this one, what does it mean, Laila Hazeh? So tzorich leimar, we have to say, the Laila Hahu hu shechoser gam bivados ha'emuna. That means that it's lacking in the in the certainty of the emuna. So Hazeh means there's a certainty in Emunah. When we say Hahu, it means that it's actually lacking in the certainty of the Emunah. So actually, even according to this pshat that the Rebbe brings down, the Yoim, Hahu, Laila Hahu is a lower level. Whether it goes along with the previous pshat in the Maimer itself, that the darkness that comes from Laila Hahu is a greater darkness than that comes from Laila Hazeh, because the fact is that Ahu creates a bigger, a greater level of choshech. And here too, in essence, the Laila Ahu is a lack of Emunah versus the Laila Hazeh, which is a convincing Emunah. The Emunah is over there. There's only a difference. Here, the Taich is Laila Emunah, and the question is a strong Emunah or a weak Emunah. Over there, Laila is a higher madrega of Laila, the way it comes down. And the Rebbe says another pirush, v'yeshloimer oid pirush, b'layla hazeh v'layla hu. We can say there's another interpretation of Laila hazeh and Laila hu. So the first interpretation is whether the night itself or the way the Laila is nimshach. The second interpretation is whether it's Amuna bevados or Amuna not bevados, Laila Hahu. And the Rebbe gives another pirish, Aloshin Zevahu Koya al Halayla, that the Loshin Zen who go on the night im Halayla who begilu Zeh Shenirgashu Halayla. So we're trying to say it's Lailo Zeh. This is a felt Lailo, that we don't feel that it's night. Need to maybe doesn't elaborate here in how all these perushim differ, but it's understood the general chiluk. Again, the first in the Maimer, he talks about the level of Laila, which is higher even than the level of the Mokar of the Oir. The two levels, the way it comes down in a way of Laila itself, the Laila Hazeh, or it comes down in a way of Hahu. Or it comes down, not the Laila itself, but it comes down with a Gilui, and that's not so great of a Laila, but the Laila Hahu is the actual Laila, greater level, a lower level of darkness because it's more darkness. Then we have the Taich that Yom is Re'iyah, either seeing Elikus or at least understanding it, because Laila is Amuna, and there's Amuna that comes in a way of Hazeh convincing, or Laila Hahu, or that it's not a convincing Laila. And here, finally, whether you feel it as Laila or you don't feel it as Laila. In Ois Vav, the Rebbe will explain why before the Yesh Lahoyer, so we'd spoken earlier in general, we have the levels of Yom Hazeh, the lower level, Yom Hahu, the higher level in Yom. Then we have Laila Hazeh, which is the lower level in Laila. And then we have Laila Hahu, which is the higher level in Laila. So now the Rebbe is going to explain that both levels in the level of Yom are the level of Gilui. The level of Gilui that comes either in Poel Mamish, which is Yom Hazeh, from the Ein Soif, when it comes through the Kav, or in the way of Seviv Kol Almim, that it comes down, it's Yom Hazeh, actual Gilui. Or it's Yom Ahu, that is talking about the way the Oir is kolul in the Moir, in the way it's called, it's Yom, but it's Ahu, it's still kolul in the Moir. Even though it's kolul in Atzmus, how could we say it, that it's Yom, that it's Gilui, but still, because this is the Shoydish of Gilui, relative to the Atzmus itself, that's called the Yom. But it's Yom Hahu. But when we talk about the Helam of Atzmus, that's even a higher level. That's even not Shaykhs at all. That's a level of Choshech. And then you have Ahu, as the Rebbe will explain here in the Maimer. But we have in the expression that we say that the Ein Sof is Lamailo Mailo Ad Ein Kates. So that would be referring to the level of Laila. This is Lamailo, my level of Laila. And when we say Lamata Mata Ad Ein Tachlis, that's the level of Yom. That the Hispashtus, the Yom is Lamata Mata Ad Ein Tachlis. The Lamailo Maila Ad Ein Kates, that's the level of Laila. Let's look inside. The Yuvan, hey, the Yuvan Zal Pi Hamevur become a Mekoimes. We'll understand this idea of this Laila, the Yom, Yemazeh, and Laila, all these different madreges based on what's explained in many places. Bepirush HaMaimer, explaining this statement, this saying. Now, this is a saying of Tikkun Zohar. The Rebbe brings down the Ha'orah, that Ein Sof is Lamailo Mailo Ad Ein Kates, and Lamata Mato Ad Ein Tachlis. So it's higher and higher to no end, and lower to no finish. What does it mean, the two madrigas? Higher than Ketz, Mata Mata Ad Ein Tachlis. And the Rebbe will explain these are the two madrigas of Lailo and Yom. The Lamato Mato, what does it mean, Lamato Mato, hu inyan ha-hispashtus v'hagilui de Ein Sof? Lamato Mato means lower is the idea of the expansion and the revelation of the Ein Sof. Gilui, the Yom. Lamato Mato, the hispashtus, the Gilui of the Ein Sof goes to the end. Shum hispashtu to misgala ad Lamato Mato, that it expands and it's revealed until it can go down all the way to the bottom. What does it mean? Lamailo mailo chulu? U'inyan ha'is almus v'ha'aliyah. That is the idea of the his almus being hidden away, the elevation Shabbat Ein Sof. It's the elevation of the Ein Sof or the hispashtus, Hamshach of the Ein Sof. Shu mis'alim behelam achar helam. What it means, Lamailo means that he is elevated and he hides with one hidden after another hidden. Ubi'ilu achar ilu, from one elevation, other elevation, Lamailo, higher and higher. So you have these two aspects of the Helem, which is Lamailo, and Gilu is Lamata Mato. Now, even when we talk about hispashtus, we call that hispashtus, but the Emerson is Helem as well. Vinigam ha'inyan de Lamata Mato, Hulu, Kamosha, Hu Be'ein Sof. In the Ein Sof, when we say it goes down lower, Ubchinas Helem, it's still hidden. Shaharei, because we talk about the Ein Sof is Lamata Mato, so even when the Ein Sof is Lamata Mato, we're still level of Helem. Shari Klolus ha'oir shalifnei ha'tzimtzum hu oir ha'kol ba'atzmusei. Because when we talk about the Ein Sof, we're talking about generally the oir, which is before the tzimtzum, before Ishtalshlus, before the kav, and before Sevim. It's the oir which is included in Atzmusei. So that oir, even though it's hispashtus, but still, it's still considered to be the level of Helem. V'oir hakolul b'moir hu l'mayla megilui. And an oir, which is included in the luminary, in the atzmus, the oir, which is in the atzmus, which is before Ishtalshul, before the tzimtzum, is considered higher than Gilui. So it's, even though we're saying that it's Gilui, but it is really in a level of Helem because it's an oir, which is kolun the moir. And this that we're saying, Lamata Mata, the tachlis, that it expands Lamata Mata, that's already not the oir. That's already after the tzimtzum. Hareagilu shenimshach mimenu Le'acharei hatzimtzum. So this revelation, when we say it comes down lamata mata, which is the either oir hakav, afilu oir hasoivev, the oir hakav, the measured, which is mamalu kol almim, or the soivev kol almim, the fact that it comes down lamata hurak ha'ore mehoir shel lifnei hatzimtzum. So that is only a ray from the oir lifnei hatzimtzum. Ha'ara comes down, but the Ein Sof itself, it's kolul b'moir, and it's a level of helam. So why do we say that it's the idea of hispashtus v'gilu de'ein sof, the level of yoim, when we're talking about still lifnei hatzimtzum and the oir Ein Sof, and it's an oir kolul b'moir, so it's helam. Why do we call that gilui? Because the real gilui comes after it goes through the tzimtzumim, after it becomes in oir hakav or the oir haseviklam, maluklam. But the oir hakav and the haseviklam is merely ha'ora from the oir shalifnei hatzimtzum, and therefore, since we're saying oir in sof is a level of gilui, a level of hispashtus, a level of yom. How is that? Aber mekomo koim zog der Rebbe Kiv on the zeh she'oirin sof hu lemato mato chulu hu koyach ha'hispashtus v'gilui the oirin sof. The fact that the oirin sof comes down lemato mato is the power of expansion and revelation of oirin sof. The oirin sof has the power of expansion. It has the power of helam. The power of expansion is expressed through the giluyim that come down lamata mata, through the erakav, through the ershe, but it comes, that's the power of expression of gilui in Ein Sof. Harigam kemoshu b'shorshoy, so even as it is in lifnei hatzimtzum, even in helam hu inyan hagilui, it's still, the concept is gilui, because the point is to be mamshich lamat. Revelation. As the Rebbe explained in the Hemshech of the Maimorim, Pedig Tezayin, that shebe'atzmus gufa hu bebchinas gilui. So within atzmus, in the oira kolul b'hamoir, within Atzmus, it's the level of Gilui, because the purpose of this oir is that it should be Gilui. That's why it is called Gilui over there. It's not Helam, it's Gilui. But then we have the Maila Kids, Ushagam Ba'atzmus in the Begeder Gilui. That means that also in the Atzmus is not defined by Gilui, it's totally Helam. Because its part is helam. The function is l'maylo adein kates. Ilu achar ilu, helam achar helam. V'yesh lema. So we can say, shahashoydesh d'shnei ha'inyonim. So what is the root of the two inyonim of Yom? Yom, we have Yom hazeh and Yom hahu. And Yom is the level of Gilui. So, what is the Yom Hahu? And what is the Yom Hazeh? The Yom Hazeh is when that Gilui comes out in the Oir in Lamata Mata Adein Tachli. It comes down to the lowest level. And the way the Oir is B'moir, that's the Yom Hahu. Yashloimar, we can say, Shashoyresh D'shnei Inyonim D'Yom. The root of these two aspects of Yom. We have Yom Hahu. The Yom Hazeh, who beho'inyan de lamata matachul. Within Mata Mato, in the Koyach Hagilui of the Ein Sof, we have the two madregas. They're both all Yom, but there's Yom Hahu and Yom Hazeh. Shagilui bepoyel la'acharei hatzimtzum. The actual Gilui, Lamata Mata Adein Tachlis, which comes down after the Tzimtzum, through the Kav, the Eir HaSevev, Hu HaShodesh, the Yom Hazeh. That is the root for Yom Hazeh, because that's the Gilui. That's the tangible that comes down. The koyach hagilu doirin sof lifnei hatzimtzum. But the power for Gilu, and we call that Gilu because it has the power for Gilu. That's the Ein Sof Kavonis Gilui is Ein Sof Natzimtzum who Hasherish the Yom Ahuu. That's the root for the Yom Ahuu, for that higher Madreg. These are both Madreges in Lamata Mata Adein Tachlis. But when we say Lamaila Maila Adein Kates, that's Lilo. Vashoirish the Lilo, Shalamailo Game Yom Ahuu. It's even higher than the level of Yom Ahuu, than the level of the Oir, Gilui of Ein Sof, which is Lifnei Hatzim, so that's even higher than that. Uba Inyan the Lamaila Maila Chulu, which is in the idea of Lamaila Maila Ad Ein Sof, in the higher level. And over there we also have the two Madregas. We do have the two Madregas. We have the Madrega of Laila Hahu and Laila Hazeh. And now the Rebbe will explain how it turns around that from the two higher, for the Rebbe explained the two Madregas in Laila, and then it turns around that Lamailo, the Madrega of Laila Hahu, is a higher Madrega than Laila Hazeh. But when it comes down Lamato, the Laila Hahu comes more darkness, more choshech, is a lower level than Laila Hahu. How did this happen? Bo. When there is tzimtzum, and basically tzimtzum is helam, and basically that's the level of Laila. That's not to give. That's the level of tzimtzum, restriction. So there's two aspects in the tzimtzum. And this is going to be the two levels of Laila Hahu and Laila Hazeh. Why do we have a tzimtzum? Either we have the tzimtzum because we want eventually, it's only through the tzimtzum we're going to get the Gilu Oir. Whether the Gilu Oir and world will come down, also love it, we'll get a higher light, as the Rebbe will say in a minute. Or the purpose of the tzimtzum is to reveal that in the tzimtzum also there is the koyach of the Ein Sof. Ein Sof is not mugbal in Gilui, but Ein Sof is also expressive in tzimtzum as well, just like as in Gilui. And these are the two parts. And then eventually we'll see that is why, because it expresses itself in tzimtzum, in the Laila Hahu, the tzimtzum is a greater tzimtzum. Let's look inside. It's known that in tzimtzum we have two aspects of it. One thing is you have tzimtzum, you have Laila, you have tzimtzum, you have restriction. But why do we have a restriction? In other words, the goal, the purpose is revelation, not in tzimtzum itself. It's tzimtzum for Gilu. What kind of a Gilu? There's two ways. The Rebbe says in the brackets here, there can be two levels of Giluyim that the tzimtzum is for. We're talking about the tzimtzum, when the Eibishter was mitzamtzim and silik, why was this tzimtzum? This tzimtzum was for the purpose that there should be a gilu, So, what are the two aspects? First of all, shaydeyat tzimtzum davke yeh losin lova gilu deinisof gamba ilamas. That later on, because there's a tzimtzum, you'll be able to get the Ein Sof in the world. Right now, the world, the Shtalshlus, is obscure, doesn't see Ein Sof. Because the tzimtzum, there will be later on a gilu from the Ein Sof in the world. That's one level. But there's even a greater level than that. V'zeh shal yidei hatzimtzum Yiyeh hagilui de pnimius va'atzmus oirin sof shelemailo gam ha'oir she'eir lifnei hatzimtzum. That it's dafke through the tzimtzum, there will be a gilui of the inner and the essence of the Ein Sof, which is even higher than the oir that was memale mokem acholol. That was before the tzimtzum. So there was the Ein Sof memale kol acholol, and that Ein Sof was on the very highest level. But in order to have the osid lovoi, a higher level than that oir that was livnei tzimtzum, but we want it to be the atzmus of Ein Sof, which is higher than this oir. For that we need a tzimtzum. But both of them are for the purpose of oir. Oir in the oilamos, pnimius oir, a higher level of oir, but it's all for the purpose of gilui. That's one aspect in the reason of tzimtzum. But there is another aspect in tzimtzum itself. Vizeh. And the second level is that in tzimtzum is revealed the wholesomeness of the Ein Sof. That the Ein Sof isn't limited, God forbid, that it has to be revealed. He has the power for obscurity. Tzimtzum is Ein Sof world. It is not limited by Gilui. And the Tzimtzum is to express that level of Helem, that Ein Sof is not Mugbal in Gilui, but it's also in Helem. That is the word Tzimtzum. And the Rebbe will explain how these two madregas come because of the level of the root in the Helem of the Oir. This we're talking about Tzimtzum, two purposes in Tzimtzum. But the root of the Tzimtzum in the Helem Ein Sof, this is all the Laila, Hahu, and Laila Hazeh, to keep track. So the Zeh Shebet Tzimtzum, Shloimer, the Zeh Shebet Tzimtzum Yeshnam Shnei Inyonim. What are these two levels in Tzimtzum? That Tzimtzum for Gilui and Tzimtzum for expression of the Ein Sof that is Koyach Behelem, who ki bekoyach hahelem the Ein Sof shoyrish hatzimtzum. Because in that power of Helem, remember we have the power of Gilui, which is the source for hispashus lamata mata de tachlis. We're talking about in the power of Helem, l'mayla den kates, in the koyach hahelem the Ein Sof, which is the shoyrish hatzimtzum, which is the root from the tzimtzum. Is also Shrei Madregas. There's two levels over there, which as a result we have the two Madregas in the tzimtzum for Gilui and tzimtzum for koyach of Helem. That he also koyach Helem. What are the two Madregas? Koyach HaHelem shemoishe shayich li inyan hagilui. It's the power of Helem as it is associated, has a connection to Gilui. Shegam dargezu, but we're not trying to say, okay, then this is a koyach hagilu, then it's the level of yoim, it's not laila, then it's lamata mata. No, this level, b'koyach ha'elam de'edin sof, this level of koyach ha'elam sof, he lemaila mekoyach hagilu, that is still higher than the power of gilu. Avol mikol makom hi shayechas legilu, it is connected to gilu. The tzimtzum shenimshach medargezu b'shvil hagilu. The tzimtzum is for gilu, so it has a connection to gilu. And then you have etzem koyach hahelem shalamayla megilu, which is even higher than gilu. The essence of the power of Helem, which is higher than gilu. Which means that tzimtzum shenimshach medargezu, the tzimtzum that comes from the darge, from the level of Helem, which is not for gilu. That is that in the tzimtzum itself there is the power of the Helem. That's the higher madrege in the shoyrish in the Ein Sof, in the level of the power of Helam of the Ein Sof, and the Lamaila Mailo is the two Madregas. The Madrega, it's just because of it, just like we explained the two Dargas in Tzimtzum, we explained it now in the Shoirish from the Tzimtzum, in the level of the Ein Sof, the power for Helam, which has the two aspects, as it connects because of Gilu, and as it is in Etzem, Helam. Now we can understand what happens all of a sudden, that when we talk about the Lilo, which is the essence of the Koyach HaHelem, higher than the level of Lilo Hazeh, which is the Tzimtzum Bishvil Hagilui, or that's the Helem that is a Shaykhs Legilui. So that means that Hahu is a higher Madrege. When it comes down Lamato, real Chayshach comes from Hahu. So he says, the two aspects of Laila, Hahu, Laila Hazeh, Kemoishem Lamato, as it comes down below, they're just the opposite the way they're in the root. The Lamailo and above, Laila Hahu, Hu Lamailo Malaila Hazeh. Laila Hu is higher from Laila Hazeh. Laila Hu is the Koyach HaHelem Be'etzem in the Ein Sof, and the Laila Hazeh is the Koyach HaHelem that is Shaykh Legilu. But the way they come down below, Hahester, the block, and here we're not talking, it's more hidden above. Ligriusa, it's more block, it's less godliness. The Laila Hahu, who has to godly Yisr, it's a greater obscurity. Mahester the Laila Hazer from the Hester Laila Hazer. So the Rebbe explains, Kishnei Hanyonim the Laila Shalamailo, these two aspects of Laila of above. These are the two levels that we're talking about in the power of the Helam of Ein and Sof. The power of Helam be'etzem and the power of Helam for Gil. Laila has hu koyach Helam. Laila, it's power for Helam. But sheshayich legilu, it applies, relates to gilu, to hazeh. The kivon shat tzimtzum shenimshach midarge zu b'shvil hagilu. Since the tzimtzum that comes from this level is for the gilui, lachein, and that's why the laila, which means what kind of a tzimtzum comes from there, because it is for the Gilui, the way, the obscurity and the blockage of below when it comes down, it becomes, stays also, Laila Hazeh. Shanirgash begilu shehu Lailo, you can feel openly the Lailo, that means you get, there is a feeling of the Lailo. Gizeh, because when you can get that, when could you get the level of feeling that gilui is when you feel that it's lilo. Because he brings the point now that it's only when you realize that there is Helem, that's when it becomes down, then you can feel it. When you're thirsty for godliness, then you can feel more by, there's a feeling of the goals. The Rebbe gives the example now. Maybe legilui, that the Lailo becomes zeh. You have to feel the Helem Similar, when a person is more thirsty in time of Golus. Golus is compared to nighttime. Which is more than at the time of the Beis Hamikdash. More tzimoin, more yearning, more laila is bisman hagolus, more than it was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. So, why is a person thirsty or more in golus? Because since there is less godliness, so by feeling less godliness, you get a greater tzimoin. When you sense the lack of obscurity, you're missing out in the golus, that brings you to a greater thirst in of Hashem. So, therefore, when we say halaylo, when it's nimshach, that there is a laila, then it becomes zeh. You feel the laila, and then you get the tzimor. But v'laila hahu, this is the laila hazeh. V'laila hahu, hu etzem koyach ha'elam shalamayla m'shaychas the That is the essence of the power of Helam, which is higher than relating to Gilu. The hatzimtzum shenimshach medargazu, the restriction that comes from that level, loy b'shvil hagilu. It's not for the Gila, but rather the power of Helam is revealed there. Therefore, the Laila below, what comes, the actual darkness, is not that you're feeling. Hanimshach means that tzimtzum, from the who. Over there, you don't feel that it's Laila. It's obscure. You don't feel that it's a Helam v'hester. And because there's no Helam v'hester, you don't get the higher madrege, you don't get to the hazeh. So over here it becomes a lower madrege. But because its point is not gilu, its point is Helam, versus the other Laila hazeh, which the point is gilu. From that source, that's why you can get to the higher tzimoin, like in the time of Golus. How does these two matters, aspects, differ in the service of a person who working in the Laila? So generally, we're working in the nighttime. This is all Golus. This is Golus within Olam Hazeh. And generally, talking Olam Hazeh B'Zichlal is also Golus. So it's all Laila. We're all in Laila. So mitzad hatzimtzum shebishvil hagilui, if the avodah is because of the tzimtzum, in order to come to the gilui, that is the yearning and the thirst to go out from the darkness of the night. You feel the night and you want to go out. That's Lailo Hazeh. You feel the Lailo. But the avodah in the nighttime, when it's zeh, for this proof, it's hahu, not zeh, but mitzad zeh, shebat simtzum izgala koyach ha'elam. The fact that it reveals koyach ha'elam is his boinenus. It's not to want to leave, but to reflect that, hey, this is in Helam Ha'atzmi. You look into the root of choshech, not to get the light. The root of this choshech is in Helam Ha'atzmi. So that is in order to get to the light, to go out from darkness. And here is to realize the Helam Ha'atzmi of the Laila itself, the advantage of this Helam in the highest level of the Ein Sof.